She had $20 to her name, literally, and she gave it to the man who couldn't pay for soup. Can you imagine that? Her last 20. Next morning, a lawyer, looking like he stepped right out of a high-stakes drama, hands her the keys to a 5-bedroom mansion and calmly says, "You passed the test." It sounds too wild to be true, right? But it is. Stay till the end, because the twist isn't just the house or even the billions behind it. It's why he needed her help in the first place. You won't believe it. Sarah Chen wiped the counter of the 24-hour diner for the third time that night, the neon open sign buzzing like a trapped mosquito right in her ear. It was late, way past her usual clock-out time. Her last shift had ended 4 hours ago, but the manager, with his perpetually stained apron and a sigh that could deflate a hot air balloon, had asked her to stay. No overtime, of course, just tips. Tips that on a slow Tuesday like this barely covered the bus fare home. She pulled the crumpled 20 from her apron, smoothing Jackson's face with a thumb, almost as if she hoped he'd multiply. A desperate, silent prayer. Rent overdue. Her mom's meds running dangerously low. And her car. Well, that old clunker was running on fumes, and a whole lot of prayer, too. Every dollar was a choice. A trade-off: gas or groceries, electricity or medicine. The weight of those choices pressed down on her, a constant dull ache behind her eyes. Then the bell above the door dinged, a tiny, hopeful sound in the quiet diner. An elderly man shuffled in his coat, 2 sizes too big, an ancient garment that seemed to carry the cold night air with it. His shoes, worn and scuffed, talked to the floor with every weary step, a soft, rhythmic squeak. He looked tired, vulnerable, and utterly alone. He sat at table 7, her section, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a cup of chicken noodle soup and a single piece of toast. Sarah served him, her heart aching with a familiar empathy. She knew that feeling, the one where you order the bare minimum, trying to stretch pennies into a meal. When the check arrived, he patted empty pockets, a slow, dawning horror spreading across his face. His cheeks reddened, a flush of shame creeping up his neck. He mumbled apologies, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah didn't think. She just acted. It was instinct, a reflex born of her own struggles and her mother's quiet dignity. She slipped her last 20 under the plate. "Sir, you dropped this?" she whispered, her voice soft, hoping to spare him further embarrassment. The cook, a burly man named Frank, who rarely spoke without grumbling, rolled his eyes from behind the grill. A table of college guys, loud and oblivious, snickered. "Way to go, sucker," one of them drawled, and his friends guffawed. Sarah felt her stomach twist that 20 meant gas or groceries, not both. But the old man's grateful smile, a fragile, trembling thing, stitched something back together inside her. It was a fleeting moment, a shared understanding that transcended money. She clocked out the silence of the street, a stark contrast to the diner's hum. The cold night air bit at her exposed skin as she walked home, telling herself, everyone deserves a warm meal. It was a simple thought, a small act of kindness in a harsh world. She had no idea that simple sentence, that small act, was about to completely rewrite her entire life. She was just trying to make it through another day, and in doing so, she'd unknowingly stepped onto a path she never could have imagined. At 7:03 a.m. the next morning, the eviction notice was taped to the peeling paint of apartment 2B. The stark white paper with its bold black lettering seemed to mock the faded cheer of her front door. Sarah read it twice, her eyes scanning the brutal words, desperate for them to rearrange into something gentler, something less final. They didn't. The legal jargon was clear, unforgiving. Her heart sank, a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Her mom, May, stirred on the couch, a soft groan escaping her lips. The stroke recovery had left half her face frozen in a permanent, heartbreaking apology. It was a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the heavy burden Sarah carried. "I'll fix it," Sarah said, her voice a little too bright. a little too forced as she kissed the smooth, unaffected side of her mother's forehead. It was a promise she wasn't sure how she could keep. She brewed the last of the coffee, the rich, bitter aroma a small comfort in the escalating chaos. She poured half into a travel mug, the warmth seeping into her cold hands. The car, as if sensing her despair, refused to start. Again. So she walked to work, the eviction notice still fluttering in her mind, a relentless, taunting flag. The diner parking lot looked different that morning. An obsidian black town car, sleek and impossibly shiny, idled up front, its windows tinted darker than her future felt. It was an anomaly in the landscape of beat-up sedans and rusted pickups. Inside, the same college guys, looking surprisingly fresh for a morning, after pointed at her and muttered, "Great." Just what she needed, more judgment. Her manager, unusually subdued, waved her over. "Some lawyer wants you. Table 7. Her stomach dropped like a stone. A lawyer. $20, that's all she thought frantically. Nobody gets sued over soup, right? The absurdity of it almost made her laugh, a hysterical, breathless sound that caught in her throat. A woman in a steel gray suit, tailored to perfection, stood as Sarah approached. She held a slim leather folder, not casually, but with a quiet reverence like it contained the nuclear codes. Her expression was neutral, unreadable. "Miss Chen?" she asked, her voice calm, authoritative. Sarah nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "My client asked me to deliver this personally." The lawyer's gaze was steady, assessing. She opened the folder, revealing a single sheet of paper. A deed. Address 14 Harbor Ridge Drive. Square footage 4800. Owner Sarah May Chen. Sarah laughed, one sharp bark of disbelief, a sound that was half gasp, half sob. It was impossible. A cruel joke, surely. This can't be real. Check the signatures. The lawyer said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. Sarah's trembling fingers traced the elegant script. They were real, authenticated. Your new home is paid in full. Property taxes, utilities 5 years up front. Everything taken care of. Sarah's knees, suddenly weak, met the booth with a soft thud. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. Why, the word was barely a whisper, a desperate plea for understanding. The lawyer slid a polaroid across the table, a grainy black and white photo. It was last night's customer, the elderly man, smiling shyly, holding the $20 bill Sarah had given him like it was a winning lottery ticket. Mr. Edward King, net worth $3.7 billion. He dines anonymously to test character. You passed. Sarah's throat burned, a mix of cheap diner coffee and sudden overwhelming tears. Her vision blurred. Edward King. The name, once just a name in the news, now resonated with an unbelievable life-altering power. The lawyer added, her voice softening slightly. He'd like to meet again today if you're free. Sarah stared at the deed, then at her cracked phone, 7 missed calls from the landlord. Each one a fresh stab of anxiety. The contrast was dizzying. One moment, eviction, the next, a mansion. She whispered the words, heavy with awe and a dawning sense of hope. I'm free. More than free, she was unbound. They drove to the waterfront, the city's glass towers, reflecting the sunrise like golden mirrors, painting the sky with impossible beauty. Sarah had never ridden in a car that whispered when it accelerated, gliding through traffic with an almost surreal smoothness. The interior was plush, silent, a world away from the rattling bus or her struggling sedan. The lawyer parked, then led her through a lobby that smelled of pine and money, a clean, crisp scent that spoke of endless resources. They stepped into an elevator that climbed so smoothly, so effortlessly that her ears never even popped. It was like ascending into another dimension. Penthouse. The The door opened onto a living room bigger than her entire apartment, a sprawling space with gleaming oak floors, a grand piano that looked more like a sculpture than an instrument, and windows that framed the city like a living, breathing postcard. Edward King stood near a polished chess set, dressed not in the threadbare coat of the diner, but in the same coat, now impeccably clean, and a comfortable, expensive-looking sweater. The transformation was subtle, yet profound. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft as flannel, a gentle rumble that belied his immense wealth. "Thank you for coming." She held out the deed, still feeling it might bite, might vanish. "I can't accept this," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. It felt too big, too undeserved. He smiled, a warm, knowing expression that reached his eyes. "You already did. The question is, will you keep it?" Sarah swallowed, her mind racing. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. "Why me?" she asked, the words barely audible. He gestured to a deep leather chair, inviting her to sit. She perched on the edge, spine straight as a ruler, still feeling like an imposter in this opulent setting. 40 years ago, he began his gaze, distant, lost in memory. "I ate at a diner wearing borrowed clothes, my pockets empty, my pride shattered. I was at my absolute lowest, contemplating giving up. A waitress, much like you, slipped me a $10 bill. She didn't know me a thing. She just said I looked like I needed hope more than change. That small act of kindness, that belief in a stranger, kept me alive. It gave me the strength to try again, to fight for a future. I vowed that if fortune ever smiled on me, if I ever made it, I'd return the favor times 1,000. He looked at her, his eyes piercing, full of a deep, ancient understanding. Sarah blinked. The story resonated with such raw emotion. "So, you go around giving houses to everybody who buys you soup?" she asked, a hint of incredulity in her voice. It still seemed too simple, too fairy tale-like. He chuckled, a soft, rich sound. "Only the ones who give away their last 20. Heat crawled up her neck, a blush of embarrassment. "How'd you know it was my last?" she asked, feeling a sudden invasion of privacy even amidst the gratitude. Edward tapped a sleek tablet on the table. Her bank balance, negative $32, glowed on the screen. He hadn't just known, he'd known. She flushed deeply. "Invasion much," she muttered, unable to help herself. He shrugged, a gesture of mild unapologeticness. "Due diligence. I also know you're 3 months behind on rent. You walk to work, and you support your mother after her stroke, ensuring she has the best care possible despite your limited resources." He wasn't just wealthy, he was thorough. He'd seen her struggles, her quiet sacrifices. Sarah clenched her fists, a knot of indignation forming in her stomach. "So this is pity?" She challenged, her voice sharper than she intended. She didn't want charity, she wanted dignity. "No," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "This is investment. I fund people who risk their own well-being for strangers. History proves they multiply whatever resource I give them. They have a rare quality, a selflessness that money can't buy but can certainly amplify." Sarah exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly. "Multiply how?" she asked, intrigued despite herself. He leaned forward, his eyes alight with a vision. "I'd like you to run my new foundation, annual budget $50 million, your salary $250,000 plus housing allowance. Mission, identify and reward hidden kindness just like yours. Deal." Sarah's brain blue-screened. $50 million, $250,000 salary, her the diner waitress. I didn't even finish community college. She stammered the words, feeling utterly inadequate in this setting. He smiled. "Degrees don't measure heart, Sarah. They don't measure courage or compassion. You have those in abundance." Behind her, the city glittered like possibility incarnate, a vast, sparkling tapestry of dreams. She thought of her mom, not just walking again, but thriving, perhaps even gardening. She thought of kids like she once was, kids who needed one warm meal, One small act of faith to believe tomorrow exists. The vision was intoxicating. She stuck out her hand, her decision made. Deal on one condition. His brows rose, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Name it. My mom gets a garden. A real garden with rich, dark soil, not just those sad little pots on the balcony. It was a small request, but it represented everything life growth home. Edward laughed, the sound surprisingly joyful, like coins spilling into a wishing well. Done. And a gardener to go with it if she likes. It was settled. Her life in an instant had been irrevocably changed. News travels faster than free Wi-Fi, especially when it involves a billionaire, a waitress, and a mansion. By lunchtime, local headlines screamed, "Waitress hits philanthropic jackpot," splashed across every online portal. Social media predictably split into two venomous camps. Camp A called her living proof that kindness pays a heartwarming tale for the cynical age. Camp B, however, was far louder, far more vicious. They claimed she exploited a rich man's guilt, a cunning opportunist. Comments stung like tiny poisoned darts, gold digger in an apron. Bet she rehearsed the sob story for weeks. Another scammer hitting the big time. The co-workers who had barely noticed her before suddenly remembered every favor she'd ever declined, every shift she'd covered, and twisted them into evidence of her supposed manipulation. Her manager, ever the pragmatist, cut her shifts. "Publicity's bad for grease," he'd grumbled, as if her newfound fame was somehow contaminating his deep fryer. She walked home, the deed clutched to her chest like armor, a fragile shield against the onslaught. Halfway, a reporter, aggressive and relentless, cornered her, his microphone branded with a screaming, intrusive logo. "Did you know who Mr. King was when you gave him the money?" he barked, shoving the mic into her face. "No," she answered, simply truthfully. Any comment on accusations of manipulation, of deliberately targeting a vulnerable, wealthy individual, Sarah's tongue felt thick, her mind a jumble of emotions. "I just bought a man dinner." She managed her voice barely a whisper. Everything else, surprise to me. The clip aired at 6, brutally edited to make her pause. Her hesitation looked guilty, evasive. By evening, strangers spammed her inbox. "My kid needs surgery. Can you help? I'm 3 weeks from homeless, please. I heard you're giving away money now." She answered each message, her heart cracking like old porcelain with every desperate plea. It was a deluge of human need, and she felt utterly unprepared. Midnight found her sitting on the apartment floor, her mom asleep on the recliner, the deed beside them like a silent monolith, a testament to her new, bewildering reality. For the first time since she'd paid for the soup, she cried, quiet, wrenching sobs that shook her shoulders. Was kindness always this heavy? Did every good deed come with such a crushing weight of expectation and scrutiny? Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, wanting only to disappear to escape the relentless pressure. But something made her answer. Edward's calm, steady voice filled the silence. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring questions." She whispered, her voice raw. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Edward," he said, his voice unwavering. "That's why I picked you, Sarah. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up when you're knocked down." The call ended. She stared at the dark window, the city humming below a vast, indifferent peace. And she realized the reward wasn't free. It came with interest payable in courage, resilience, and an unwavering belief in her own heart. Foundation headquarters occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, a space that managed to be both industrial and inspiring. Exposed brick walls mingled with soaring skylights, letting in floods of natural light. Laptops glowed like lanterns on long communal tables, a hive of quiet, focused activity. Sarah wore her best blouse, still faintly diner logo faded despite countless washes, and a borrowed blazer that felt both too stiff and too formal. She felt like a character in a play wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. Edward, ever the quiet maestro, introduced the team. There was the data scientist, a brilliant, intense woman who mapped generosity hot zones with algorithms and spreadsheets. A former teacher, now a passionate grant writer, whose eyes sparkled with the potential of every story. And a tech guy barely out of college building an intuitive app that would allow anyone anywhere to nominate an unsung helper. Sarah's title, Edward announced with a proud smile, was Director of Human Impact. The words felt impossibly grand, almost surreal. Their first mission, finalize the inaugural recipients. The whiteboard, a massive expanse of white-listed 50 candidates, each story more humbling, more deserving than the last. Sarah's imposter syndrome screamed a shrill, unwelcome voice in her head. These people were experts, seasoned professionals. What did she know? She tentatively raised a hand. "Shouldn't we start smaller? Learn to walk before we try to run?" she suggested, feeling a tremor of doubt in her voice. The data scientist, a woman named Anya with a precise bob and even more precise glasses, pushed them higher up her nose. "Scale equals proof, Miss Chen. Proof equals donors. To make a real impact, we need to show the world what's possible and quickly." Her logic was irrefutable, but the pace felt dizzying. Sarah felt the room tilt, a wave of anxiety washing over her. Edward, however, simply stepped back, watching her with a quiet intensity, like a proud chess master who'd sacrificed his queen on purpose, confident in the larger strategy. He wasn't solving her problems. He was letting her learn to solve them herself. The meeting lasted 4 hours, a whirlwind of budgets, metrics, and heartbreakingly inspiring stories. Sarah, despite her initial apprehension, found her voice. She suggested 2 crucial tweaks. First, include rural zip codes. Kindness, she argued passionately, isn't urban exclusive. It thrives in forgotten corners too. Second, cap gifts at 25% of an applicant's total need, ensuring they could serve more people, creating a wider ripple effect. The team, after some debate, agreed. They recognized the wisdom in her lived experience. Edward smiled small, a subtle nod of approval that meant more than any verbal praise. Afterward, he pulled her into the hallway away from the hum of the office. "Second-guessing yourself?" he asked, a knowing glint in his eyes. Constantly, she admitted, feeling a rush of relief at his understanding. "Good," he said, his voice firm. "Ego blinds, doubt sharpens. It keeps you humble, keeps you learning." He handed her a sleek credit card, her name embossed on it. "Operational budget. Don't buy yachts." She laughed, a brittle, terrified, but undeniably exhilarating sound. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was the thrill of possibility. Walking to the elevator, she realized that tomorrow she'd sign papers that could genuinely redirect life stories. The power felt lighter than the 20 in her apron pocket, yet heavier than the house deed. It was a power to do good, to shape destinies. She texted Mom, "We're planting tomatoes next week, real ones." 3 dots of typing appeared then. "Bring the big pots." Sarah grinned, swiped at a few stray tears before they could fall. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them, about everyone who believed in the quiet power of a helping hand. The foundation van, a discreet yet capable vehicle, rolled into Millerville Population 1029. It was one of those sleepy, forgotten towns where the only traffic light still blinked red on all sides, a perpetual warning to slow down to notice. This was Sarah's first field trip, her first official act as Director of Human Impact. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Their candidate, Mrs. Hattie Lopez, a beloved lunch lady who for years had quietly used her meager pension money to buy winter coats for students whose families couldn't afford them. A true unsung hero. Sarah brought a check for $50,000, enough to not only reimburse Mrs. Hattie, but to refurbish the school library and stock it with new books for a decade. It was a gift that would keep on giving. Kids, their faces bright with anticipation, lined the gymnasium, paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling like a whimsical winter wonderland. Sarah stood at the podium, a simple microphone, amplifying her voice, which trembled slightly at first. Kindness. She began, her gaze sweeping across the young faces. Is like these snowflakes, small, unique, but together they change the entire landscape. Her words, simple and heartfelt, resonated in the cavernous room. Applause thundered, a joyful, unrestrained sound that filled the gymnasium. Mrs. Hattie, her eyes brimming with tears, hugged Sarah so hard Sarah's spine popped. It was a hug of pure, unadulterated gratitude, a moment of profound connection between two women who understood the quiet power of giving. Outside, the ever-present reporters waited, their cameras flashing like hungry eyes. The same reporter from earlier, relentless as ever, shoved a mic forward. Any response to claims you're staging PR stunts, Miss Chen? That this is all just a calculated image boost for the King Foundation? Sarah's answer came calm, clear, and surprisingly strong even to herself. She met his gaze directly. If feeding kids, if ensuring they're warm in winter, if giving them books to dream with is a stunt, then I hope to be guilty every single day. The video went viral overnight. Hashtag GuiltyOfKindness trended worldwide, a powerful counter-narrative to the initial cynicism. Even the most hardened critics softened. One notorious online troll, known for his relentless negativity, tweeted, "Maybe the world needs more staged niceness like this." The tweet incredibly garnered 500,000 likes. It was a turning point. Friday 9th, 12 p.m. Sarah answered a call from Edward's doctor, a private number she recognized instantly. Her heart leaped into her throat. "Miss Chen?" The doctor's voice was grave, urgent. "Mr. King collapsed. Possible cardiac event. He's asking for you." The world, which had just begun to feel stable, suddenly spun again. The hospital smelled of bleach and ticking clocks, a stark, sterile environment that amplified the gravity of the situation. Edward lay pale against the white sheets, oxygen tubes curling like translucent vines around his face. Despite the pallor, he managed a faint smirk when he saw her. "Told you I was mortal?" he whispered, his voice raspy. Sarah's throat burned a familiar ache. "Don't joke," she pleaded, her eyes welling up. The thought of losing him, losing this unexpected mentor, was a fresh, sharp pain. He squeezed her hand, his grip weaker than she expected, a fragile connection. "Listen," he urged, his eyes urgent. "The foundation, the board will try to push you out. They'll say you're too young, too green. They'll try to seize control. Fight them, Sarah. Fight for what we built." She swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. With what she asked, feeling a surge of panic. She was just a waitress, still new to this world of power and influence. "Use the 20, he said, his eyes glinting with a familiar wisdom. Sarah blinked, confused. "I spent it, Edward. That was the whole point." "Exactly," he affirmed, a ghost of his old smile. "Remember what it felt like to have nothing, to make that impossible choice. That's your weapon, Sarah. That's your leverage. Never forget where you came from and why you started this." The monitor beeped steadily, a rhythmic reassurance in the quiet room. Sarah stayed until visiting hours ended, holding his hand, absorbing his strength, his legacy. Next morning, the headlines weren't about her or even the Foundation's latest good deed. They screamed about Edward's empire wobbling on stock dives and rumor sharks. His illness had sent shockwaves through the financial world. The board meeting, already scheduled for the following week, was moved up to Tuesday. Sarah prepped like finals week, crammed into 48 hours. She pored over bylaws, memorized clauses, hired attorneys pro bono, a network of legal eagles Edward had subtly connected her with. She called journalists she now knew by first name, planting seeds of truth, preparing the ground. This wasn't just about her job. It was about Edward's vision, about the countless lives the foundation was touching. Tuesday, the boardroom smelled of polished cedar and tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Board members, stiff in their expensive suits, questioned her experience, her salary, even her narrative, the very story that had brought her there. They picked apart her decisions, her leadership, their voices dripping with thinly veiled contempt. Sarah stood, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a single crisp $20 bill, and slid it across the gleaming mahogany table. It was a replica, of course, but the symbolism was potent. "This," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the boardroom chatter, "is what your CEO started with. This is the seed. Prove you can steward that better than I have. Prove you can honor his vision with more integrity and compassion, and I'll walk away. Right now." A silence thick as fondant descended upon the room. The challenge was stark, undeniable. They couldn't, they wouldn't dare. The vote came swift and tense, 6-5 in her favor. She kept her seat, but more importantly, she kept the mission, kept Edward's dream alive. Leaving the building, she texted Edward a photo of the same 20. Caption: "Still multiplying." He replied with one word: "Proud." Sarah cried on the sidewalk, the towering skyscrapers reflecting her tears like disco lights. For the first time, she believed she might actually belong here. This wasn't a fluke. It was a fight she had won, a testament to her strength and to Edward's unwavering faith in her. 3 months later, the King Foundation had given away $4.2 million across 12 states. It was a testament to Sarah's relentless drive and the dedication of her team. Her inbox overflowed, not with demands, but with thank you notes, each one a poignant story of lives changed, a single dad who kept his lights on his family warm, a shy teen who could finally afford prom, and crucially, her college applications, a struggling dog shelter that stayed open, its furry residents saved. Each story was a stone dropped in water, the rings widening, reaching further than Sarah could have ever imagined. Corporations inspired by the foundation's success and the #GuiltyOfKindness movement began copying the model: anonymous kindness audits, surprise bonuses for unsung employees, rent relief programs for their staff. Local news coined it the Sarah effect, a term she secretly detested. She hated the spotlight, the attention, but she absolutely loved the multiplication table, the exponential growth of goodwill. One night, needing a moment of quiet reflection, she drove. Yes, that old clunker had finally been replaced by a reliable, eco-friendly hybrid to the diner. Same cracked booths, same familiar bell above the door. She ordered soup, sat at table 7, the very spot where her life had irrevocably changed. Before leaving, she placed a crisp $100 bill under the plate and a simple note: "Keep the change, pass it forward." The young waitress, a tired-looking girl who reminded Sarah so much of her past self, read the note, her eyes welling up. She carefully taped it to the register, a small beacon of hope. Within a week, regulars inspired by the story and the growing fund had added another $1,000 in tips, creating a permanent kindness fund for staff and struggling customers. Sarah never claimed credit. She just smiled every time the video clip of the growing fund replayed on someone's phone, a quiet satisfaction blossoming in her heart. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Mom's garden grew tomatoes so heavy the branches bowed under their sweet weight. Neighbors drawn by the vibrant patch of green shared seeds, then recipes, then Sunday dinners, creating a true community. A housing complex in a struggling part of town, one that the foundation had helped revitalize, even renamed itself Chen Court. Sarah laughed when she heard it. "I don't even own a courtyard," she'd joked to her mom. But she did own something bigger: permission to believe that small acts consistently applied could scale into monumental change. She kept the original 20, Edward's 20, in a simple frame on her desk, its signature side facing outward like a North Star. Visitors often asked if it was real, if the story was true. She answered, her voice soft but firm. "Real enough to buy a house, real enough to change my mind about what's possible for all of us." Some nights she still walked home past the old apartment, the lights off the eviction notice probably still fluttering on the door. She'd whisper, "Thank you to the darkness for the breaking point that became the breakthrough, for the moment she chose compassion over personal need, and for the ripple it had created." Autumn brought with it a golden light that softened the edges of the city, and a letter addressed in shaky cursive arrived at the foundation. It was from Edward. "Dear Sarah," it read, the words a little faint. "I'm the man from table 7. I'm fading, but I need to see you once more." Sarah canceled meetings, caught the next available flight, her heart a heavy knot in her chest. The hospital room overlooked the harbor boats bobbing like toy ducks on the shimmering water. Edward was thinner, frailer, but his eyes still held that sharp, intelligent glint like winter stars. He patted the bed rail, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Close the door, Sarah." She did, her hands trembling. He pulled an envelope from beneath his pillow, a thin, unassuming thing. "Final gift," he whispered, his voice weaker now. "Don't open it till I'm gone." Sarah's voice cracked, tears blurring her vision. "Don't talk like that, Edward. You're not going anywhere." He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Statistics aren't sentimental, child. My time is drawing short." They played chess on a small pocket-sized travel set he kept by his bed. He still won in 7 moves, his mind as sharp as ever. "Let me win just once," she sniffed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Never," he said, a spark of his old fire in his eyes. "That's how you learn to think 3 moves ahead, isn't it?" Evening stretched into night, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside the window. Sarah stayed holding his hand, sharing quiet memories until the early hours of the morning. At 3:07 a.m., the monitors flatlined. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood in the hallway, the envelope trembling in her hand, a profound emptiness settling in her heart. She waited until dawn, until the first sliver of light touched the horizon, then opened it. Inside, a $20 bill, crisp, perfectly preserved, year 1983, the exact year he'd been homeless, the year he'd received his own transformative act of kindness. A note, written in his familiar, elegant hand, accompanied it. "Spend it on someone who can't pay you back. That's how the cycle starts. E.K." Sarah pressed the bill to her heart, tears hot and streaming down her face. It wasn't just money. It was a legacy, a living instruction. She flew home, walked straight to the busiest intersection downtown, a place teeming with life and struggle. She found a busker, his guitar case open, his music weaving through the urban din. She quietly placed the 20 in his case. The musician, startled, looked up, then strummed louder, a surge of renewed energy in his playing. Passers-by stopped, phones out, and cash, inspired by the unexpected generosity, began to follow. By sunset, his case held $300. Sarah walked away before the cameras arrived, content in the quiet knowledge of the ripple she had started. That night she wrote in her journal, Edward died, but the 20 is immortal. She realized the mansion, the foundation, the headlines, they were just branches. The 20 was the root, and roots, if tended with care and intention, never stop growing. Edward's final lesson was perhaps his most profound. The legal reading of the will occurred in the very same penthouse where Sarah had once felt so utterly out of place. Now she walked in with a quiet confidence, a sense of belonging she'd earned. Edward, ever the visionary, had left half his immense fortune to the foundation, ensuring its perpetuity, and the other half to medical research, with one audacious caveat. Sarah was to remain executive director for life. If she ever chose to leave, or if the board attempted to remove her, the entirety of the foundation's funds would revert to a corporate lobby, a clear, unmistakable deterrent. Gasps circled the room. Board members who'd doubted her, who'd tried to push her out, now found themselves utterly dependent on her signature, her leadership. The irony was almost palpable. She felt the weight of legacy settle across her shoulders like a lead-lined cape, heavy but empowering. Standing, she spoke not from a script, but from the heart. "I accept this responsibility," she stated, her voice resonating with authority under two conditions. First, full transparency. Detailed reports of all foundation activities and expenditures will be posted quarterly, accessible to the public. And second, every single board meeting will open with a story. A story of someone helped by a micro-gift, a small act of kindness we've amplified. The attorneys blinked, clearly unprepared for her demands, but the clause was ironclad. Edward had ensured her power was absolute. They had no choice but to agree. Leaving the building, reporters swarmed her, eager for a soundbite. "How will you cope with such immense power?" Miss Chen One asked, his tone skeptical. Sarah paused, remembering Edward's words, his quiet wisdom. She quoted him, her voice strong and clear. "Power is just energy. Focus it, you illuminate. Bottle it, you burn." She walked on her heels, clicking like punctuation marks on the polished pavement, leaving the reporters to ponder the depth of his philosophy. That evening she sat at her childhood desk in the mansion, the original 20 Edwards 20 framed overhead like a sacred relic. She drafted a new initiative, legacy loans, zero interest, pay-forward micro-grants, seated by the framed bill's exact serial number once it re-entered circulation. It was a symbolic gesture, a tangible link to the beginning of it all. The first recipient, a janitor in a struggling neighborhood, a man with a dream of starting a community laundromat in the food desert side of town. Sarah mailed him the 20 as a symbolic first share. He texted back a photo of washers being unloaded from a truck caption, "Cycle begins." Sarah smiled, feeling Edward's approving nod somewhere in the ether. Legacy, she learned, isn't just what you leave behind. It's what keeps moving, keeps growing when you're gone. It's the continuous unfolding story of impact. Winter's first snow fell soft and silent the day Sarah signed the final paperwork, officially taking the reins of Edward's vast empire. It felt right, a crisp, clean beginning. She drove to the old apartment, the familiar peeling paint and rattling elevator, a stark contrast to her new reality, to pick up Mom. Boxes were neatly stacked, labeled with May's precise script, "Kitchen Memories Garden." Each box held a piece of their old life, ready to be transplanted. The elevator still smelled faintly of fried onions and stale dreams, but now it felt less oppressive, more like a memory. May waited by the door, bundled in a new coat Sarah had secretly bought her, navy wool, soft as forgiveness, a quiet luxury. They locked the door together, May pressing her palm to the peeling paint, whispering a soft goodbye in Mandarin, a moment of closure for a chapter that had been difficult but ultimately formative. Outside, the snow muffled the city's usual clamor, creating a serene, hushed world. Chen Court's courtyard, now beautifully landscaped, glowed with strung lights, a warm invitation. Neighbors, many of whom the foundation had directly or indirectly helped, welcomed them with casseroles and handwritten welcome cards, a true community embracing its own. Sarah carried Mom over the threshold, a reverse echo of parents carrying brides. But here it was the daughter cradling the woman who had once carried her across oceans, across continents, across a lifetime of struggles. Inside the house smelled of fresh pine and new paint, a clean canvas for their future. The back patio already held raised garden beds, the rich, dark soil waiting patiently for spring. May knelt, her tears dripping into the earth, a silent blessing. Sarah joined her planting winter garlic, something resilient, something to grow even when everything else rested, a promise of future harvests. That night they sat by the fireplace, the flames dancing hypnotically, cups of jasmine tea warming their palms. May spoke quietly, her voice imbued with a lifetime of wisdom and a newfound peace. I worried, Sarah, that I had left you nothing, no inheritance, no easy path. But it seems, she paused, a gentle smile gracing her lips. It looks like you found everything. Sarah rested her head on her mother's frail shoulders, feeling the comforting weight of her presence. You left me the belief that kindness is currency, Mom. The world just finally matched your exchange rate. Snow tapped softly against the windows like gentle applause from the universe. Sarah glanced at the framed 20 glowing under the lamplight, feeling its quiet, steady heartbeat. She realized home isn't just a structure. It's the story you tell yourself when the walls are falling and the echo that answers back, you're not alone. For the first time since that fateful night in the diner, she slept without checking the locks twice, completely, utterly at peace. 1 year after the soup that changed everything, Sarah sat across from a famous podcast host in a sleek studio, its walls lined with soundproof foam. The host, a sharp, engaging woman, asked the question everyone wanted answered. Do you, Sarah Chen, feel you deserved a mansion for $20? Sarah smiled, a genuine, confident smile that reached her eyes. Deserve is a currency of ego, she replied, her voice calm and thoughtful. I didn't get a mansion. I got a test of character and then a powerful tool of impact. The house is just storage for the mission, a place to facilitate the real work. The host, intrigued, pushed further. Any guilt living large when so many others still struggle, when you yourself came from that struggle? Sarah answered with a story, not a defense. She'd quietly downsized her own wing of the mansion, converting 3 rooms into free night classes for immigrant moms, learning English, a quiet nod to her own mother's journey. Utilize luxury, she explained, her gaze steady. Don't worship it. Let it serve a purpose beyond self-indulgence. The host softened, genuinely impressed. Last question. Sarah, what happens if the foundation money runs out? If Edward's legacy somehow depletes? Sarah chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. Money is a river, not a lake. It flows, it changes, it sometimes runs low. But if it ever dries, we'll plant gardens in its bed and teach people to grow their own dinner. Kindness is open source. It adapts. It finds new ways to flourish. It doesn't need billions to exist. The interview went live at dawn. By lunch, it had 5 million streams. The comment section, usually a cesspool of negativity, filled with stories of viewers tipping baristas, generously paying utilities for struggling neighbors, slipping 20s into coat pockets at thrift stores. One user even stitched the clip with footage of himself handing a hot pizza to a shivering family, caption, passing the 20 forward. Sarah screen-grabbed the post, sending it to the foundation group chat with a single triumphant line, "Legacy loading." That night, she walked the harbor, the wind snapping like fresh sheets, a cool balm against her face. She realized the interview wasn't just for publicity, it was a mirror held up to the world. And the reflection winked back, saying, "We're ready to be generous, if given permission." She texted Edward's old number out of habit, knowing no one would answer. Still, she typed "Rivers Rising." Somewhere in the city lights, she felt the echo, let it flood. So here's my question for you. If you found a 20 in your pocket right now, who would you give it to and why? What ripple would you start? Drop your answer in the comments. The best story gets a surprise micro grant in Edward's honor. Hit subscribe for more proof that kindness compounds faster than interest. And share this video with someone who thinks one person can't change the world because $20 says they absolutely can. Sarah still works table 7 on the last Friday of every month, her apron pockets empty except for a single crisp 20. She doesn't need it for gas anymore or for groceries, but she keeps it like a compass pointing north toward humanity, a constant reminder of where she came from and the journey she's on. The mansion has gardens, the foundation has wings, her mom has tomatoes even in the depths of winter, and Edward's River keeps rolling, picking up steam, carving new paths of generosity. If you remember only one thing from this incredible story, remember this. The size of your wallet doesn't determine the size of your impact. Your willingness to let go of the last thing you think you need, that's what truly matters. So next time the check arrives and someone's short, don't just calculate the cost. Calculate the cycle you could start, the ripple you could create. Because the world doesn't revolve around money, it revolves around those quiet, powerful moments when one person decides, "I've got enough to share." And that decision, like a certain $20 bill, can buy a house, build a foundation, replant a garden, and maybe, just maybe, change the orbit of someone's entire life. It can change everything.